CRA presented a sample SR&ED project for the software industry. The event was presented by members of both industry and the CRA and started with a context background. It talked about new web techniques for animation and quasi-real-time interactivity in browsers. It then gave a quick background on what we'd call the technology, or I would call the business context, that typically in the past software programming was done at low-level languages which required programmers, and now as development environments become more sophisticated, they may shelter us from some of the technology and at the same time create problems because they're unable to meet certain user needs. As the background to the sample project, they talk about a sample company, WoW Company, that designs and implements interactive game applications. They want higher quality animation and interactivity similar to those of video games, and to distribute this over the internet. They then talk about various constraints, and within this example they provide both examples of uncertainties and objectives. Objectives such as bandwidth, which could vary, uncertainties such as methods to deal with latency or transmission delays, and other objectives again such as dealing with peak load levels or number of concurrent users. They then go on to start a discussion, and they say that several tasks or activities were undertaken. The first is trying to select the development environment. Secondly, illustrating issues that are dealt with on embryonic or new technologies such as Flash, Flex, or older technologies such as Ajax that have to integrate with those. How to get the interactivity of the new technologies in with existing technologies. And thirdly, some of the issues created by open source software. How to integrate public source software with commercial software and achieve interactivity or integration goals. The CRA's discussion questions then addressed how do we identify the technological advancement, what issues do having open source software components have on this, and is the combination or the integration of the open source and commercial software a relevant objective or variable on the SR&ED description. The key problem with this example is the CRA claimed that this was not intended to be an example of eligible work. In turn, most of the stakeholders and participants were upset that they felt we needed more examples of eligible work instead of things that were not eligible. In response to this, we've rewritten this description to try to illustrate some of the base issues that would create eligibility and the rationale behind this. We'll now provide an overview of the CRA software example using our R&D-based system. If we log in and open Project 1202, we can expand on the facts and details provided in the original CRA project, including providing some quantifiable objectives such as response times, memory usage, number of concurrent users, CPU usage, and so forth. Ideally, these should be benchmarked against industry standard practice. In other words, what steps did we take before we started this work to ensure there was no off-the-shelf solution and to leverage the best existing methods as a starting point? They can include articles via the internet, competitive products, similar in-house technologies, component suppliers, queries to experts, and so forth. These then form the basis of the technological uncertainties, and more importantly, the variables of technological uncertainty that we've identified as a basis for experimentation. These would be the things where we could not find an off-the-shelf or routine solution based on standard practice. Perhaps an easy way to overview the entire project is using our key criteria summary. So looking at this summary, we can see that we've in fact benchmarked standard practice and provided quantifiable objectives, and then we've identified the top 5 key variables. They can include the locking methods. Do we use spin locks or muteses? Under what conditions? Could be scheduling issues, queue sizes, Levels, priorities. Do we use threads versus processes? Do we do things at the kernel or user level? And so forth. Each of these variables then provides the basis of technological uncertainty that support the related experimental activities. To be an experimental SR&ED activity, the activity should be necessary to resolve one or more of these pre-stated variables of uncertainty. The testing methods should be outlined as either analysis, process trials, or complete prototypes. The results should be compared to initial objectives or expectations, and most importantly, we should identify which of any of the key variables we've provided a conclusion upon. The CRA clarifies that an activity does not have to be successful in order to represent a technological advancement. In fact, determining that a hypothesis is incorrect can represent the technological advance. The last issue is to ensure that the cost and/or materials are reasonable in respect to the fiscal year and the activity claimed. One of the biggest faults of SR&ED software claims that go to court and lose is the fact that they feature more on the objectives as features and functions as opposed to the resolution of the key variables. The resolution of these variables represent the advancement of computer science and the SR&ED components of the project as opposed to the business components. Once these variables are clarified, the related SR&ED activities are generally easy to identify.